Dr. Singh. Dr. Udaya Narayanna Singh is the director of the Central Institute of Indian Languages in Mysore, India, and is a renowned linguist as well as an esteemed poet, playwright, and essayist in Maithili and Bengali. He set up the Center in Applied Linguistics and Translation Studies at the University of Hyderabad and taught in the universities at Delhi, Baroda, and Surat. He has published widely on linguistics, translation studies, and sociology of language. As a creative writer, he has published 4 collections of poems and 12 plays in Maithili under the pen name Nachiketa, as well as 6 books of literary essays and 2 volumes of poetry in Bengali, besides translating several books. He has also designed and created 545 short films in English on the teaching of Bangla, Marathi, Tamil, and Kannada languages under CIIL's Bhasha Madakini project. He has been the general editor of the prestigious series from Sage titled Language and Development. Currently, as the general editor of the Longman CIIL Dictionary series, Dr. Singh has compiled and completed 6 bilingual dictionaries to be published by Longman in 2009. Dr. Singh was a poet invitee at the Frankfurt Book Fair, leader of the cultural delegation of writers to China, and has also visited and lectured in Bangladesh, the Caribbean, France, Germany, Italy, Nepal, Pakistan, Russia, Singapore, Sweden, Thailand, and the US, and received several grants and honors. Welcome, Dr. Singh.
Thank you. In fact, after listening to 2 of the excellent presentations by Hugo Barreto and Giulio Bianco, it is not an easy task to make a sense of what I'm trying to do when I'm talking about India Speaks, India Writes, where the emphasis is to mention that the planned language is to plan societies. In fact, if you look at the speech variation in the Indian context, I would like to give you a quote from a Times of India essay, which was written by one of the reporters called Sandy Sundaram. She narrates her own story where she says, "My father was posted in the true Telugu districts." Telugu is a language. "It was but natural that we siblings spoke purest Telugu. Grandma, being a true Tamilian, Tamil another language, made sure we also spoke Tamil, and the tutors gave us the basics of English. Mother, being a very wise lady, engaged a Hindi tutor. To complicate matters, father went to Calicut and Mangalore, making us reasonably proficient in Kannada and Malayalam." This is the order of the day in India, and there are many, many examples of this kind throughout the language planning literature, sociolinguistic literature in India, which will talk about this. So essentially, India speaks and writes in many, many languages, and language has always mattered to us. For instance, in the ancient Indian education scenario, one of the important things was considered to be absolutely essential for the princes or for the elites was to have a shiksha. What shiksha meant was phonetics, that is to be able to pronounce in different languages perfectly well. And in all ages, we always had authors who wrote in many languages. My own language, which is Maithili, had a poet, the poet laureate of Maithili, Vidyapati, in 13th, 14th century, who gave the famous slogan called Desi Labayana Sabjana Mittha. Mother tongue is dearest or the sweetest to all the people, irrespective of what kind of affiliations they may have. And this man wrote in Prakrit, in Abhatta, in Maithili, and in Sanskrit. It depends on what he wrote. When he wrote about the tours and travelogues and geography, he wrote in Sanskrit. When he wrote poetry, he wrote in Abhatta and Maithili. He also wrote in Prakrit. And that's important that, his plays, which was continuing with the tradition of Kalidasa, you would find a couple of languages being used at this point of time. In fact, if you look at the speech communities in India, almost all the speech communities will be multilingual, where there will be a base language within, and in the periphery, there will be other languages which come through acculturation. So there's a kind of peelable entity. Language is viewed in that particular manner in the Indian nation state. But at the same time, we are aware of a large number of languages which are still longing for freedom, longing for greater amount of use and their language rights in India. And I will come to the issue as to why I'm saying this, because if you look at the total statistics of Indian scenario, this is mind-boggling to see why exactly this is so. However, the institutes like ours, like Central Institute of Indian Languages, we've been working on so many languages. The National Tape Archive is located there, which has 118 language data. We also have a huge amount of other kinds of data, speech as well as audiovisual, the visual, vis-a-vis languages. So you have the film archive and so many other kinds of archives. Now, when you look at the options that we had when we started our journey in 1947 as a nation state, we could either talk about one language, one kind of party system, one kind of, the unity that we would like to bring. We could force a unity on India. But that's not the way India existed in earlier days. It has always been argumentative, as Amartya Sen brings out in his book called The Argumentative Indian. This is a tradition which has been there right from the beginning. Therefore, I would take you to Suniti Kumar Chatterjee, his statement in a book called in a book called Kirata Janakriti, where he says that India has always been a harmony of contrast. And that's the language which he uses for Indian scenario, where the systemic unities are very important here, rather than the differences that have come about in the Indian scenario. So wherever, if you look at the Indian situation, you'd find that India has been standing at a plurality square, where you have a language, culture, society, and literature, and each one affecting the other. Because there are cases where the languages are different, but they share the same culture, or the cultures are different, but they share the same language. And if you look at it, it goes round and round. In case of Indian scenario, there are lots of changes that happen in one part of the country, and that affects the other part. So you have similar kind of examples which you can replicate from each of the language families in the country. If you look at the scenario from the South Asian scene, from the pattern of migration, you would notice that there has been a migration from the west to the east. This is not something which I go into detail, but this is only to tell you that we have always had people coming from outside. This is nothing which is new. But how have we treated them? There has been initial clashes, there have been initial wars, but eventually they have settled it down in the country, and they mixed with the other population, and as a result, each of the languages that have come in through migration, through wars, through various other kinds of movements, they have all got integrated into the country. They got split into several other languages, but there are also some basic unities that existed in the country. And if you look at the west to east migration, and if you look at the genetic division in the South Asian scenario vis-a-vis the entire Asia, you find that South Asia, or India, has emerged as a linguistic area right from the beginning. This was only pointed out in 1958 by Murray B. Emino, but this had existed even from the earlier days. So basically, the tendency has been from the clashes to commingling. People have come together, and all latecomers, wherever they came from, they have very interestingly got mixed with the local population. So assimilation has basically been the order of the day. The assimilation that was talked about here by Suniti Kumar Chatterjee in the quote that I give here on the Indo-Europeans, they talked about the strengths of the Indo-Europeans who came into India, that they were very strong in terms of organization, in terms of discipline, in terms of warfare, mental vigor and qualities, and they brought with them the language. But what happened eventually is that when they got mixed up with the local population, the Dravidians, the Austrics, the Tibeto-Burmans, they themselves split into so many parts. So Indo-Aryan became so many different kinds of Indo-Aryan very soon, very quickly. So the split and merger had been the order of the day. Integration and conflict have been order of the day in the country. We understand that this is exactly the way the dialectics of the country worked, and this is something which is unavoidable. Now let me look at the complexity. As I told you that I'll give you an idea of the complexity of the Indian scenario.